Universal Music Group's history of controversial practices can be traced to its corporate origins. Initially part of Music Corporation of America, which itself faced scrutiny for alleged ties to organized crime in its early agency days, UMG emerged as a distinct entity following various mergers and acquisitions. When Seagram purchased MCA in 1995 and later merged with Vivendi in 2000, each corporate restructuring brought questions about how artists' contracts were handled during transitions. During the 1980s and 1990s, MCA Universal's contracts typically featured royalty rates of 10 to 15% for new artists, extensive recoupment clauses covering all production, promotion and even some marketing costs, cross-collateralization provisions allowing the label to recoup advances from any revenue stream, contracts spanning 5 to 7 albums, often taking a decade or more to fulfill, rights to master recordings remaining permanently with the label, limited audit rights for artists, making royalty verification difficult. The foundational structure of traditional recording contracts at Universal and other major labels created significant power imbalances. Artists received advances that seemed substantial but had to be fully recouped before receiving additional royalties. These advances covered recording costs, video production, tour support and sometimes radio promotion, all charged back to the artist. Artists like JoJo were locked into contracts signed when they were minors, unable to release music for years during legal disputes. Her 2004 contract with Blackground Records, distributed by Universal, led to a 7-year legal battle before she could release new music. Artists seeking to exit contracts early often had to pay substantial penalties or surrender ownership stakes in their existing catalogue. George Michael's famous legal battle with Sony in the 1990s highlighted this industry-wide issue that also affected Universal artists. Standard contracts granted universal permanent ownership of master recordings, which is a practice criticized by numerous artists, including Taylor Swift. Though her dispute was primarily with Big Machine, Republic and UMG. The transition to digital created one of the most significant royalty disputes in modern music history. The crux of the issue was whether digital downloads should be classified as sales, typically paying artists 10 to 15%, or licenses, typically paying 50%. Universal consistently categorized digital downloads as sales, substantially reducing artist payments. A landmark case emerged in 2010 when FBT Productions, which produced Eminem's early work, sued Universal's Aftermath Records. The Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals ruled that digital downloads should indeed be considered licenses, not sales. Despite this ruling, Universal reportedly continued classifying digital downloads as sales for many artists. This led to multiple lawsuits, the Chuck D, Rick James estate and Rob Zombie class action in 2011, an $11.5 million settlement in 2015 for a class action led by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods over digital royalties, and specific artist lawsuits from acts including the Allman Brothers Band and Weird Al Yankovic. Internal documents revealed in these lawsuits suggested Universal executives were aware of the classification discrepancy, but maintained the sales classification to preserve profit margins. As streaming became dominant, new controversies emerged. Black box money. When Universal negotiated with streaming services, they often received advance payments and equity stakes. The distribution of these non-royalty revenues to artists remained opaque. A 2016 study estimated that as much as $2.5 billion in such black box money had not been properly distributed to artists industry-wide. Universal's collective bargaining power allowed it to secure higher rates than independent labels, creating an uneven competitive landscape. Internal documents from the Sony Music hack, though not directly from UMG, revealed that major labels negotiated minimum guarantees regardless of actual streams. Artists and auditors have documented how Universal's royalty statements became increasingly complex during the streaming era, making it difficult to verify payment accuracy without specialized accounting knowledge. When Spotify went public, Universal owned approximately 3.5% of the company. Artists complained that profits from this equity position were not shared proportionally with the creators whose work built that value. Universal's approach to copyright enforcement online has been particularly aggressive. Starting around 2007, Universal implemented automated systems that issued takedown notices without adequate human review. This led to numerous documented false positives, the removal of Lessig's academic lecture on copyright law, the takedown of a video showing a child dancing to Prince's Let's Go Crazy for 29 seconds, known as the Lens v Universal case, and multiple instances of taking down content containing brief samples or incidental music that would likely qualify as fair use. In Lens v Universal Music Corp, spanning from 2007 to 2016, mother Stephanie Lenz posted a 29-second video of her toddler dancing while Prince's Let's Go Crazy played faintly in the background. Universal issued a takedown notice, leading to a 9-year legal battle. The Ninth Circuit ultimately ruled that copyright holders must consider fair use before issuing takedowns, though the Supreme Court declined to hear the case. On YouTube, Universal would often claim content through Content ID systems, not to remove videos, but to monetize them without sharing revenue with creators who might have valid fair use claims. A 2016 study showed that approximately 28% of Content ID claims on transformative content were questionable. Universal has been particularly aggressive regarding sampling. The company pursued numerous lawsuits against hip-hop artists for uncleared samples, even when the samples were minimal or transformed. The landmark Grand Upright Music vs. Warner Brothers case, though not directly involving Universal, established the precedent that all samples require clearance, a position Universal strictly enforced. Licensing fees for samples from Universal's catalogue were often prohibitively expensive for independent artists. While primarily involving Sony, Universal and other major labels employed similar DRM technologies that installed software on consumers' computers without adequate disclosure. The Electronic Frontier Foundation documented how these technologies created security vulnerabilities. Between 2003 and 2008, Universal supported the Recording Industry Association of America's strategy of suing individual file sharers. They often targeted college students, single parents, and others unable to mount significant legal defenses. Many defendants settled for $3,000 to $5,000 regardless of the actual infringement scope. Universal was a key supporter of three strikes policies that would terminate internet access for alleged repeat infringers, a measure criticized by United Nations reports as potentially violating human rights to information access. Universal was among the strongest supporters of the Stop Online Piracy Act and Protect IP Act, legislation widely criticized for potentially enabling censorship and disrupting internet architecture. The CD price-fixing scandal revealed systematic anti-competitive practices. A 2000 to 2002 investigation found that Universal and other major labels had colluded to maintain artificially high CD prices through minimum advertised price policies. The resulting settlement required the companies to pay $143 million in compensation and distribute $75.7 million worth of CDs to public and non-profit organizations. Internal documents revealed that executives were aware that manufacturing costs had decreased, while retail prices increased approximately 40% between 1983 and 1996. Universal's growth through acquisition raised significant competition concerns. The 1998 Polygram acquisition gave Universal approximately 25% market share. The 2011 EMI acquisition further consolidated power, requiring divestiture of certain assets to secure regulatory approval. By 2020, Universal controlled approximately 33% of the global recorded music market. Internal documents from EU merger investigations revealed that Universal explicitly sought to increase bargaining power against retailers and emerging digital platforms through these acquisitions. While direct payola, paying for radio play without disclosure, became illegal in the 1950s, Universal and other labels developed workaround systems. Using independent promoters who paid radio stations promotional expenses rather than directly for airplay. A 2005 investigation by New York Attorney General Elliot Spitzer resulted in Universal Music Group paying a $12 million settlement. Documents revealed systematic payments to radio stations disguised as contest giveaways, promotional support, or consulting fees. A 2006 FCC settlement required Clear Channel and other radio groups to provide airtime for independent artists, acknowledging the impact of these practices on limiting radio diversity. Perhaps one of the most egregious incidents involved the 2008 fire at Universal Studios, which destroyed a vast archive of master recordings. According to a 2019 New York Times investigation, approximately 500,000 master recordings were destroyed, including irreplaceable works by artists like Billie Holiday, Chuck Berry, Elton John, Nirvana, and countless others. For over a decade, Universal did not inform most affected artists that their masters had been destroyed. When questioned, company representatives often provided misleading information about the status of recordings. While publicly downplaying the fire's impact, Universal privately pursued a $150 million insurance claim and legal action against the storage facility, valuing the lost masters at over $150 million. In 2019, multiple artists including Soundgarden, Hole, Steve Earle, and Tom Petty's estate filed a class action lawsuit seeking $100 million in damages. Internal documents revealed during discovery showed that Universal had created a comprehensive list of lost recordings but had not disclosed this to artists. The company eventually admitted to the losses, but argued they had no contractual obligation to inform artists about the status of their master recordings, highlighting the power imbalance in standard recording contracts. Universal's approach to digital rights management created significant consumer friction. Universal-supported DRM systems limited the number of devices on which purchased music could be played. Format incompatibilities prevented consumers from transferring legally purchased music between devices. When Universal launched its Total Music initiative in 2007 to 2008, it required consumer data collection and usage restrictions that raised privacy concerns. As streaming emerged, Universal leveraged its catalog to shape the market, requiring equity stakes in emerging platforms like Spotify and SoundCloud as a condition for licensing. Insisting on guaranteed payments regardless of actual usage, disadvantaging smaller services and independent labels, using exclusivity windows for high-profile releases to drive subscribers to preferred platforms. Documents from various legal proceedings showed that Universal executives explicitly discussed using catalog access as leverage to secure favorable terms, regardless of the impact on artist compensation or platform sustainability. Universal's handling of unreleased material has drawn criticism. Selective release of vault material based primarily on commercial potential rather than artistic or historical significance. Posthumous releases that artists had specifically chosen not to release during their lifetimes. Remixing and altering archival recordings without clear artistic justification. The company's handling of artists like Amy Winehouse, Tupac Shakur, and Michael Jackson after their deaths raised questions about respecting artistic intent versus maximizing catalog value. Many artists have found their earlier work effectively trapped. When Universal acquired labels, catalogues of less commercially successful artists were often neglected. Reversion rights were typically fought vigorously, even for recordings with minimal commercial exploitation. Out-of-print albums remained unavailable even as digital distribution eliminated physical inventory concerns. As new technologies emerged, Universal has attempted to retroactively claim rights. Artists like Linkin Park's Mike Shinoda have publicly disputed Universal's claims to NFT revenues from works where NFTs didn't exist when contracts were signed. Contract amendments sent to artists in 2021 attempted to secure rights for technologies not yet in commercial use. The complex transition to digital created new administrative problems. Incomplete or incorrect metadata in Universal systems has led to misdirected or missing royalty payments. A 2019 audit by a major artist revealed in court documents found error rates exceeding 20% in streaming royalty attributions. The company's royalty portal for artists was criticized for providing limited data compared to what the company itself received from platforms. Internal company practices have also faced scrutiny. A 2020 internal review acknowledged historical underpayment and unfair contractual terms for black artists. Former executives have described systematically lower advances and marketing budgets for artists from minority backgrounds. Legacy contracts from acquired labels included particularly onerous terms for R&B and hip-hop artists compared to rock and pop acts. Many documented unethical practices at Universal reflect broader industry problems. Artists historically negotiated without access to the same market data and projections available to label executives. For most of its history, getting signed to a major label like Universal was seen as the only viable path to meaningful commercial success. Recording agreements often exceeded 100 pages of complex legal language, with many artists reporting they didn't fully understand what they had signed. The high cost of litigation and the risk of being blacklisted within the industry created barriers to challenging unfair practices. Royalty statements lacked standardization and transparency, making verification difficult. In fairness, Universal has implemented some reforms in recent years. In 2015, Universal announced it would share with artists the advances it receives from streaming services. In 2021, the company launched a program to write off unrecouped balances for artists whose recordings were more than 20 years old. Some newer contracts have moved toward higher royalty percentages, though often balanced by expanded rights claims in other areas. Following industry-wide racial justice discussions in 2020, Universal established a $25 million change fund to support diversity and inclusion initiatives. However, critics note these changes often came only after public pressure, legal challenges or competitive necessity, rather than proactive ethical reforms. The documented unethical practices at Universal Music Group reflect a company that has often prioritized maximizing shareholder value and market control over equitable treatment of artists and consumers. While some practices have improved over time due to legal challenges, technological changes, and evolving public expectations, the fundamental power imbalance between the corporation and individual creators remains largely intact. Many of Universal's most criticized practices were and are industry standards, reflecting structural issues in music business models rather than isolated corporate decisions. Nevertheless, as the world's largest music company, Universal has played a significant role in establishing, maintaining, and defending these practices throughout its history. The full impact of these practices on musical culture, including what music wasn't created or widely distributed due to these systems, remains impossible to fully quantify.